Okay, today is day 18. I wanted to give you a retail case study. Before I get into that, I thought I would kind of share a lunch I had yesterday with my bankers. They're with RBC. And it was funny. So in my signature, I've got some of my social links, and they came across my podcast, and they were very curious. Not a lot of commercial real estate developers and investors have a podcast or have written a book, and they wanted to know a little bit more about it. So I explained to them kind of part of the thought process behind it. And really what I explained to them is that there's not many real estate investors that are taught how to invest in commercial real estate. I never was until obviously I met, first I got my job at Sun Life doing commercial loans. Then I met my first mentor, Jim. Then I met my second mentor, my father-in-law now. And I realized that I was very fortunate, obviously. And if people were only ever exposed to how to invest in residential real estate, that worked for a long time. But the conversation that I had with my two bankers yesterday was, the number of people that they see investing in residential real estate that might own 5 homes or 10 homes. And if they bought in the last 5 to 8 years in a market like Calgary, which has either been flat or slightly declining. I mean, last year, I think the latest stats I saw, house prices went down 2.2% on average, right? So obviously, depending on where you are in the city. But if houses are going down 2.2%, you have to remember leverage works both ways. So the argument typically, and this isn't against residential real estate investing. I still own my first townhouse. I rent it out. But I think it's important to understand when you're looking at pro formas from residential real estate opportunities, if they're showing appreciation of 3 to 5% a year, and that's why the total returns are these big double digits. What happens when it goes down 2 or 3% a year and you're leveraged up kind of 4 to 1, in most cases? Well, that 2% turns into a 10% loss. So as long as everyone investing is fully aware and understands this, then at least from my perspective, I'm just helping people kind of be aware. Now, I saw some comments. One comment yesterday about the fact that this lady felt it was very risky to invest in retail or industrial, and the reality is, if you don't know what you're doing, it is very risky. And I'm not suggesting that this 30 days is going to make you an expert. It's taken me 12 plus years of doing this full time. But if you've got a right foundation, a foundational understanding, a right team, and then you're patient and you find the right properties, I'll show you how a gentleman that started in working with me I want to say it was probably about a year and a half ago, was when I first met Don. I'm changing his name a little bit just to kind of protect his privacy. But Don and his wife, they came to me. They had just invested in a residential property. And, from the outset, they thought it was going to be just kind of a passive investment, right? Buy this up-down bungalow, rent out the basement, rent out upstairs, make a couple $100 a month in cash, watch the market climb 3 to 5%. And, on the piece of paper he showed me, it was going to be, 15 to 22% in annualized returns. Well, I said, okay, well, let's do the math. Like, where are you today? And after he suited out the basement and rented it out, and with his down payment, he was into it for about $150,000. After just on, if it was full, based on his rents, he was getting about $1,800 a year, $150 a month. So it's about 1.2% return. Now, with his principal pay down, that is it's real. I mean, it's phantom income, like he gets it later on down the road. But that will generate probably kind of 5 to 6% a year in terms of return on investment for him. The challenge, though, is that if he has a vacancy, if he has any repairs and maintenance, he has to property manage it himself. Any of those kind of variables all of a sudden put that investment underwater. Now, the reality is, unfortunately, when he bought at probably not the greatest time. And his property is underwater now. He'd probably have to stroke a check for 25. Well, he wouldn't have to stroke a check because he has so much equity in it, but he would lose about 25 to $40,000, and that doesn't include obviously lease sales commissions for realtors to sell it. So, needless to say, he wasn't enthusiastic, obviously, about the first investment in real estate, and he was a little, I don't want to say jaded. He still believed that there was an opportunity, but because he was so heavily weighted in the market, and he wasn't super excited about the property that he had purchased. He said, like, what other opportunities are out there? He'd come across a listing that I had. Unfortunately, the listing that I had didn't make sense for him. And so we spent the next 4 months looking at other properties. We started with multifamily. He wasn't keen in Calgary based on the fact that, in the price point that he was looking, they were going to be older properties. And frankly, it was going to be a little bit more intensive for him. And he wanted something that was going to be more passive. He didn't want to have to think about it. A couple hours a month, he's okay with that, but he doesn't want to have to be, overseeing a property manager and dealing with kind of a higher turnover, if you will, in multifamily. So we looked at both industrial and retail. He settled on retail. We found him just a tremendous property. It's grocery anchored. It's in a power center. It's surrounded by, like, basically there's this concept, I think I talked about it in yesterday's post, which is like this gravitational pull. When you've got like these major power centers, so you look at like a RioCan or First Capital here in Canada, they've got probably 500,000 to 1 million square feet of retail, and people drive from pretty far distances to come and shop in these locations because they can get everything all in one area. And so fortunately, we were able to find him an out parcel in one of these developments. There was 0% vacancy. There was a lineup of tenants that wanted to be there. And so from a risk perspective, and the building itself was built in 2015, I want to say. So everything was really lining up now, this isn't like a home run. He's not making like 10% cash on cash. He's probably in that 6 to 7%. In this case, he's right around, I want to be a little bit sensitive. He's right around kind of $7,000 to $8,000 a month in free cash flow. Probably takes him no more than an hour to 2 hours to have a conversation with his property manager, make sure everything's going well, gives everything over to his bookkeeper or his accountant. And it's just been a very good experience for him. Now, I will say this, when we went through the closing, it was rocky, and that happens in commercial real estate. There are so many things that happen and are unknowns that most new investors would either, I've seen this where it's almost like, oh, it's a sign, like this deal is so tough, it must be a sign for me to back out. And it's not a sign. It just means that this is the reason why so few people actually get into commercial real estate, because it is hard, it is difficult. And so if you go into it with the expectation that it's going to be tough, that there's going to be some unknowns and some rocky, it might be a little bit rocky getting to the closing, then when it happens, you understand that and you're expecting it, and it's like, oh, okay, this is not every deal is going to be smooth. Not every deal is going to be, simple and easy. There will be some challenges, and at the end, when you've completed the deal, you'll look back and say, you know what, it wasn't that bad. But when you're going through it, it will seem very difficult, which is why having a great team, having a very clear why you're doing this, so you stick it through, is so critical. So anyways, that's really, you'll see the write-up where I kind of talk a little bit more about the experience that Don went through. And, at the end of the day, he's extremely happy he went through it. We're actually looking at another property for him. This one property, when it's paid off, will be his retirement, or it could be his retirement plan. Today, no, it's not replacing his retirement, but it would probably be the equivalent of like 70 or 80 residential houses. So he's got that in one property, professional property manager, 1 to 2 hours. I know one lady who has like 48 houses here in Calgary, and she has like a team of 3 or 4 full time that have to manage these. I'm sure she does quite well. He's got one property and a property manager where, I mean, if he wanted to go to Hawaii for 6 months or a year, he could literally pick up the phone and the business of this property would continue to go. So it wasn't easy to find, took us a long time. We probably looked at 25, 30 properties. We made some offers on some deals and it didn't come together. So the goal is not to sell you on this is easy and fast and so lucrative. It can be very lucrative. It does take time. You really want to make sure you've got good people around you that are protecting you all the way through. It's not going to be, it may be rocky or bumpy on the closing, but is worth it. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. Your homework is to find 10 commercial properties just to start looking at them. And this is a concept that I learned when I was going through business school at U of C, and that is to do like a SWOT analysis. So what do you like about the properties? So the strengths. What do you not like? What are the weaknesses? Are there any opportunities to add value? Look for vacancy. Look for areas that you believe that you might be able to push the rent or the NOI. And then last, what I would say are, what are the threats? Is the building obsolete? Is it hard to get to? Is it poor visibility, poor access, right? All the things that we went through in yesterday's video and write-up. So do that, find 10 properties and just start to get more comfortable, because the risk in commercial real estate comes from not knowing. The more you know, the more you practice this, the more confident you're gonna feel. And now that Don's gone through one property, I don't want to say he's an expert, but I can tell you when he goes into the second and third property, he's going to have way more confidence and comfort. So that's it. I'll see you tomorrow.